I believe that with customized caring support, all kids and young adults can achieve. About 50 years ago, and it's kind of hard to believe 50 years have gone by, but 50 years ago when I was 8 years old, my mom took me and my older siblings and left my dad because of domestic violence. About 3 years later, my dad was sent to prison. It was his first incarceration. My mother was contacted by my dad's prison caretakers. They said it would be good for him if he would be allowed to return to live with us, and my mother agreed to do that. As a young adolescent, I remember thinking, well, they wouldn't release him from prison unless he was better, right? I was wrong. It's not clear what formal support my dad had after he was released, but the next year living with him was not a good one. He abused me, and after the second time it happened, I told my mom, who said she'd take care of it, and sure enough, it never happened the third time. My mom took us and left my dad again. A couple of years, we moved into the back of the dry cleaning shop where my mother worked, and a couple of years later, my dad was reincarcerated a second time, and then soon thereafter, a third time. Growing up in poverty with domestic violence and an incarcerated parent, well, that's been proven to be the recipe for incarceration for many children. But I was blessed. I had a caring, involved parent as a mom who worked about 65 hours a week. I had a caring older brother, teachers, family, and school friends. When I look back over the past 14 years, I can see that I've been blessed to have been able to do a few things, including to be a tutor for a couple dozen at-risk kids in Trenton, be an advocate and mentor for 10 other at-risk and foster kids, be a part-time instructor at Mercer Community College, who's taught 65 college courses to about 900 inmates for the same college that graduated my dad when he was in prison in the 70s. Be a speaker at a Trenton Gangland Task Force meeting where I testified that the rise of gang violence mostly coincided with the fall of families and neighborhoods. Be a writer of a report on offender rehabilitation that, among other things, proposed changing the word prisons into an acronym, Pre-Reentry Institute Strategies of New Success, and be the writer of 3 Times of Trenton newspaper articles on kids' rights, including not allowing children to be raised in broken families with no parental training, or in broken neighborhoods with no neighborhood family support centers. As for the 10 kids whose lives I've been involved, 4 were foster kids, whose parents had 9 children. After about 12 years of investigations, the 7 children who were still juveniles were taken into custody by the Child Welfare Agency. About a year later, I became a volunteer for the state judiciary. After an interviewing process, a state police and FBI background check, and after being trained, I was assigned to be the court-appointed special advocate to the young adolescent boy of that family and 3 of his sisters. I met with the children twice a month and logged over 1,000 volunteer hours over the next 33 months. I learned that the boy had been arrested 2 times before he had become a foster child. But no one seemed to be aware of the first 2 arrests or care until his 3rd and 4th arrests. I attended his juvenile court hearing. It had taken the juvenile justice system 2 years to adjudicate his first 2 arrests. Perhaps the 3rd and 4th arrest would not have occurred had the juvenile justice system acted more timely. The boy refused to meet with his probation officer and was sent to Mercer House. After walking away from Mercer House, he was arrested and sent to the juvenile detention center. The judge ordered him be sent to a 3-month residential drug treatment program. Because the boy's caseworker never told me about him being assigned to that program, I couldn't prepare him to accept that placement. He had walked away from other placement that I was not made aware of. So, sure enough, when he was taken to that 3-month program, he refused to sign in. They couldn't take him. So his caseworker had to take him back to Trenton, and when she did, she stopped to fill out some paperwork, and when she did that, he walked away from her. He was arrested at his grandmother's house and returned to the juvenile detention center. I confronted him about the love he said he had for his siblings, particularly his younger sisters. I asked if he loved them, why was he doing things that led to him being arrested and handcuffed and arrested? He cried a bit and agreed to be placed in a 3-month program. However, the judge had already decided to assign him to a 9-month program. By explaining to him how his not cooperating was making things worse, I was able to convince him to accept the 9-month program. I had to reconvince him each of the 4 weeks it took his caseworker to complete his paperwork. I accompanied him on a drive to the 9-month program. With some persistence, the 9-month program recognized my role and relationship to him and allowed me to visit him even during the blackout period. He eventually achieved enough in the program and was released. Now, although I was already the boy's court-appointed special advocate, the Child Welfare Agency had requested, and the court authorized me to be the boy's educational guardian as well. When the school district he began attending began out of school suspending him 3 times a week for being disrespectful, I contacted the superintendent and asked that they cease and desist out of school suspending him. During a school meeting, I asked if there were a value to attending that school, how could they out of school suspend him 3 days a week and expect him to learn? The school district agreed to transfer him to a special services school district from where he was graduating. I was also advocating for appropriate school services for 2 of the boy's younger sisters, for whom I was also their court-appointed special advocate and educational guardian. The girls' inner-city school district never provided the services it had recommended and promised the state it would provide. Moreover, there was nothing individualized about their individual education plan. However, being a state employee and trying to hold the foster girls' public school accountable turned out to be an impossible task. My volunteer advocacy for the girls resulted in someone filing an ethics complaint against me because someone believed the foster girls were a third party to the state's interests. And that person believed I was trying to obtain an unfair educational advantage for the foster kids by having the urban school district provide the services it had promised the state it would provide, but never did. The way I looked at it, the foster kids were only guilty of being born. Society was guilty of not ensuring parental training, good neighborhood, and a good school for them. Fortunately, I was able to make the state understand that it has an interest in the kids it takes legal custody of, and the state should not consider foster kids a third party to the state. The State Ethics Commission determined I did nothing wrong, but my state employer did not want me to continue being a judiciary volunteer for foster kids. It's been about 3 years since I've been formally involved with the foster kids. The 2 younger sisters had already been adopted, so my judiciary role had ended. But because they are growing up in one of the worst neighborhoods and attend one of the worst schools in one of the worst school districts, I stay involved informally. My goal for them has been to break the intergenerational cycle of poverty. As for their brother, my goal for him had been to avoid incarceration. I've had very little contact with him the past 3 years, but I have reason to believe he has fallen back into the street lifestyle he had chosen before I first met him. My name is David Carbone. My dad had been adopted as a child, and as an adult he was incarcerated 3 times, totaling 16 years over a 20-year period. As a child, I was raised in poverty in Jersey City in a family with domestic violence with an incarcerated parent. As a juvenile, I was abused by the child molester the state released to come live with me. As an adult, the state filed an ethics complaint against me for acting within my state judiciary volunteer role advocating for foster kids. But I was blessed. Since childhood, I've had a nuanced support network that's evolved and extended into my adulthood. And because of that, I believe with customized, caring support for all kids and young adults can achieve. And I have what I call a support youth initiative, or SAY IT for short. And I invite you to support all youth, as well as just say it over and over until we really do support all youth, and the sun shines on every one of them. Thank you for listening.